All right, listeners, I think you know that we are part of the Radiotopia network, which is basically a network built on the idea that you should support the most creative, independent audio makers around. No one, and I mean no one, embodies the Radiotopia ethos more than Benjamin Walker and his show Theory of Everything. Benjamin, who I've known for a long time, has been making beautiful, personal, sprawling audio documentaries for decades that help us understand the very strange world we live in. And now he has a new series called Not All Propaganda is Art. The new series goes back to the 1950s, when Western security agencies like the CIA paid artists, writers, and intellectuals to fight the cultural Cold War.
The CIA funds were free. I mean, no one was told what to say.
Gloria Steinem, activist who sees the CIA as a sort of enlightened pal or rich uncle, there is another viewpoint.
Look, if you're listening to this show, I know you like secret histories. I know you like a mix of culture and politics and shadowy figures. So what are you waiting for? Not All Propaganda is Art from Benjamin Walker. You can find it now wherever you listen or at theoryofeverythingpodcast.com. This day is brought to you by Progressive. Are you driving your car or doing laundry right now? Podcasts go best when they're bundled with another activity. Kind of like Progressive home and auto policies. They're best when bundled too. Having those two policies together makes insurance easier and could help you save. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save nearly $800 on average. Quote a home and car bundle today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $793 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, February 22nd, 1958, the Direct Action Committee is making preparations for a large march in London to protest against nuclear weapons. They're doing all the things you do ahead of a big march, which would be in about a month. But, there's communication, there's outreach, logistics, and maybe they're starting to make some signs. And then they're thinking, what would go on these signs that we're going to hold at this march? Well, it was on this day, ahead of this nuclear disarmament march, that what came to be known as the peace symbol was originally presented. Now, you can picture it probably. It's the circle with the line down the middle and the two branches coming off at the bottom third. It's like the Mercedes-Benz logo with the extra little line down the middle. This is where it came from. The symbol was immediately adopted by the Direct Action Committee for their march, and the symbol would, of course, go on to be used worldwide and come to be about much more than just nuclear weapons. It is the peace symbol. So here to discuss those origins and where it has gone from there are, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hi, Jody.
Hey there.
And our special guest for this episode, friend of the show, is Ian Chillag, host of the Radiotopia show, Everything is Alive. Ian, welcome back to the show.
Welcome. Peace be with you.
Yes. He's making the peace sign with his hands right now, which we can maybe get into that too. And one of the reasons that Ian is on, in addition to just being a friend of the show, is that it is the Radiotopia fundraiser right now, and we figured that it would be a good time to have someone from the Radiotopia family on to show how great Radiotopia is. And, this is a reminder, listeners, that, here we go, your support is more than just a symbol. It is a critical piece of the pie. We can't make this show without you. But no, okay, I apologize.
Did you say
but
piece
no.
of the pie?
Yeah. Look, it's the fundraiser. Support shows like ours. Support shows like Ian's.
The only way the puns end is if you support us.
So, Ian, you wanna take the lead here? What exactly does the peace symbol mean? I mean, it's so ubiquitous. I've never stopped and actually thought, like, what does it symbolize?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Mercedes-Benz logo in your intro there. And when you asked if I wanted to talk about the peace symbol, I remembered I had a horrible memory. When I was in junior high, I wrote a short story about someone who was crashing into people in crosswalks to spread the message of peace in their Mercedes, so that the last thing people would see would be the peace, the almost peace symbol.
That
story surprisingly was never published.
Yeah.
Shocking.
So Ian clearly grappling with the complicated legacy of the symbolism here. But in a more straightforward sense, Niki, what does this peace symbol actually symbolize?
So it is not actually based on the Mercedes-Benz logo. Although, are they sponsoring us? Because I feel like we're giving them a lot of free press right now.
I would love that. We'd probably have to not do fundraisers if Mercedes-Benz is our sponsor.
20% off your first order is still a lot of money if it's a Mercedes.
Just enter this day in the box up top. So it's actually, though, based more interestingly, perhaps, on the semaphore alphabet. So for those of you who are not immediately familiar with the idea of the semaphore alphabet, that's where they use the flags to signal different letters. And so the peace symbol corresponds with the letter N and the letter D. Because what the peace symbol was for nuclear disarmament. And that was the kind of code that was embedded in the downward lines are the N, the straight line is the D, and that's the hidden code in the peace symbol.
The designer, Gerald Holtom, again, inspired by the N and the D, but maybe also there's that Goya painting of the man with his arms outstretched in front of a firing squad. So clearly, I'd never realized this, but there's a sort of human figure at the center of this peace sign, I think, in a number of ways. It's interesting. Holtom had this upside down version of the original, which he was considering going with, and originally it was the semaphore is N for nuclear disarmament, and then the upside down version would include sort of a U, right? And he thought the U would stand for unilateral disarmament. And he felt like it was a mistake to actually make it about nuclear disarmament. And in fact, unilateral disarmament was really the larger goal. And the U would have gotten that, only a designer who knows all symbology would actually think, people are misconstruing the message because they see an N and not a U. It's like, no one sees any letters, buddy, but yeah. But nevertheless interesting.
No, I wouldn't. I was getting confused by the description because in my head I'm like, U, N, okay, wait, where's the D?
Yeah.
Too much. It's too complicated. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
You haven't memorized your semaphore alphabet, Kellie?
No.
Shocking.
To me, I think it's always remarkable how you can think about these symbols that have become so much a part of our lives or our lived experiences. We walk by them all the time and would never think of nuclear disarmament. We might think of, when I think of like the peace sign, I think of like hippies in the 1970s and flowers and like all kinds of like, that era of love and peace. But it makes a lot of sense to use this as a symbol that people can really start to put everywhere, that to make it this public sign that this is what we are standing for, or standing against, I should say.
And Holtman was a conscientious objector in World War II, so there's clearly tapping into a deep sort of legacy of personal commitments to peace. In terms of how it quickly sort of spreads, it's remarkable how quickly it does, because at this march in London is Bayard Rustin, who is one of the sort of most notable civil rights figures in the United States. And he sees this symbol and immediately brings it stateside, and it starts to work its way into not just nuclear disarmament, but the civil rights movement. And then from there it goes and goes and goes.
It's funny that Holtom had, initially thought about using the Christian cross in designing the peace symbol, and then after a little bit of thinking, thought, that might mean, the Crusades to some people. That might not be a global symbol of peace. That was a little bit of a second thought on his part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the peace symbol stand out is exactly that. Like, it doesn't have another set of meanings. And so there are other signs of peace, like the dove is a symbol of peace. The V with your fingers becomes a peace sign. But those have other meanings in other contexts, whereas because it was created just in this moment, it has a very specific meaning that is attached to this moment in the 1950s when nuclear war was top of mind for peace activists, because at this point, it wasn't just the U.S. and the Soviet Union that were nuclear powers, but Britain had become a nuclear power as well, which is why this gets its start in Britain.
Yeah, I would have thought, when I think about peace too, I do think about a dove, actually. Or maybe a white flag, but I think that's like for surrender, so maybe that's not the same concept. But it does not take long for this to take off and spread. And it's also interesting that they don't trademark it. So it allows people to really decimate the image as far and as wide as possible without having to worry about like copyright infringement or having to pay someone to use it.
God, imagine if you were Holtom and you had trademarked it and you were a billionaire and people said, "Oh, how'd you get your money?" And you said, "Well, I trademarked this symbol of peace uniting the world."
It's like, you know, every time a 18-year-old kid in Vietnam draws the peace sign on his helmet, I get 4 cents for that.
Dark.
One reason we know this symbol, one reason it ended up on so many flags is it's if you are designing a flag, you're on your way to the march, you're in a hurry, anyone can draw it. It's so easy. Like if I tried to draw a dove, you might, I don't know, you might, oh, he has a porcupine on his flag. Right. But no, and is that the chicken of peace? But the peace sign, it's just, he made it easy. And so it was everywhere.
But I mean, the bumper stickers, the sweatshirts, the merch, the gear. There's a lot of stuff that has the peace sign on it that we don't pay attention to. Yeah, the tattoos.
I have a friend who got, when he was in high school, he got a tattoo of the peace sign on his calf. And then when we met when we were in our 20s, he was so embarrassed about it, he had it converted into a wagon wheel. He just had 2 more spokes added to the peace sign.
Amazing. Well, okay, let's go there, and then I think we'd circle back to some of the specifics of the history, because I do think a big question here is kind of, what is it now? Is it cheesy? Is it corny? I mean, to me, I feel like, you know, being in high school in the late 90s and, you know, being young in the early 2000s, it felt like the last gasp in my mind of the peace sign as a sort of earnest thing. And then somehow it became campy or cheesy or too earnest or something. But what is your assessment of kind of where it's evolved, especially over the last 15, 20 years?
I think cheesy is right. I mean, the aesthetic is so closely tied to the late 1960s and the tie-dye of the 1970s. It actually reminds me, I don't know if you remember in the movie Forrest Gump, where he like inadvertently invents the smiley face.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, like that's, first of all, the cheesiest moment in a cheesy movie. But the peace sign could have easily been the symbol that he invented, and you would be like, yep, Forrest Gump invented the peace symbol.
Yeah.
No, I think of like the adverse reaction, which is like people thinking of it as a satanic symbol, like the John Birch Society that's like, this is demonic, you know, like I think of the ways that we think of created symbols and how we associate those things with either pagan practices or, which is interesting because, you know, being the first thought was to be a cross, which is a Christian symbol. But then, like, the reverse is you create something, and well, then if it's not Jesus, it has to be satanic. Like, right. But there's that whole sort of backlash about looking at something that people can't necessarily explain right away, having some sort of like nefarious meaning to it.
Yeah, it's. I don't know if it's even. It's probably definitely not possible to do this, but. You know, if you didn't know the context of this symbol and you looked at it strictly as design, what would you imagine it was? Like it does, you know, there is no, peace doesn't look like anything. So the peace symbol is not, oh, that's clearly peace. Pie, maybe a pie with 2 slices gone.
Yeah, or a person, maybe at some deep subconscious level, you know, it really does evoke a person.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
I'm a little surprised that the peace symbol hasn't worked its way back into the culture now. I mean, like, tie-dye is coming back. I think even, like, flashing the peace sign a little bit in photos has come back. A little of the sort of, like, earnestness and of hippiedom has come back, which I think is, like, 90s nostalgia, which was 60s nostalgia. But basically, you know, it's come back. And I'm just surprised, like, I see tie-dye shirts on people under the age of 25 all the time, and I don't see the peace symbol, and I'm like, why didn't that come back in this moment? It's a little
Is
strange.
it an emoji, or what are those things? The little.
Oh,
It is an
like-
emoji.
Yeah, I feel like if it was an emoji more people used, then maybe you might see it. But I use my heart emoji all the time.
Yeah. It is. It is the O in the coexist bumper sticker, which is
Which
prominent
things that
in
haven't
certain
aged well.
neighborhoods.
Is that still floating around? That's only floating around on Volvo station wagons from the 1997 or earlier. I don't think people are still slapping that on there.
In the parking lot of live tapings of Wait, Don't Tell Me, you see a lot of those.
I believe it. It has certainly gotten co-opted, and maybe that has a little bit to do with the eye rolling and the cheesiness or whatever. But you see it on, I think Lucky Strike cigarettes put it on their packs at some point. Like brands are putting it on. Tiffany pendants with the symbol. So I think that probably takes a little teeth out of it for sure.
Wow, stamps. I mean, it's funny to me that I don't. Like, when I think of other symbols that have become, like, I think of the rainbow or, like, the rainbow flag. That hasn't become cheesy to me, though. It's taken on a much more of an identity than the peace symbol has. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that's because we think of peace in and of itself as cliche. So it's sort of like, Miss America, world peace. Like, we don't have an appreciation for it as being something either real or obtainable, and maybe that may be part of the cynicism attached to it, is that it feels fraudulent to sort of like put something out like this, particularly in American context when like war is always constant. I don't know, maybe that's part of the reason why people poo-poo it.
Yeah,
I don't think people talk about pacifism as a sort of core identity, being a pacifist as a core identity in a way that they used to as well. That's a really good point. Yeah.
I mean, now I kind of want to bring the peace symbol back. I feel like Kellie's right. It seems like that there's an entire ethic that's built into the peace symbol, not only of nuclear disarmament, which I think still remains a pretty important cause, but that kind of idealism that would emerge a little bit in the late 1950s, but especially in those early 1960s, that it was attached to that. And I think precisely because a lot of that idealism soured. It lost some of its potency, but we could use a hopeful, idealistic symbol these days.
Mm-hmm. But thinking about it, like especially as you said, in contrast to the rainbow flag, there's something about it that, and I think the reason it is embarrassing is it suggests such a simple view of the world. Like. A rainbow flag, you are aware of bigotry, and you are aware of that there is this fight, and the idea that a flag with a peace symbol on it that could solve anything, it suggests, I don't know, if you're waving it, you kind of don't understand how things work. You're kind of communicating that maybe,
a naivete a little bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think the sort of nuclear disarmament roots of it feel like they matter? I mean, as Holtom died in 1985, and he talked a little bit about how, people didn't really know what it really stood for, that it meant no nukes. Does that change your assessment of it all? Is it worth keeping that in mind, or has it sort of totally eclipsed that at this point?
I think that makes it much more interesting because it sort of situates it right in a moment when people were starting to come to terms with what scientists had just unleashed on the world, which is interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. I think if more people knew that, they would appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Ian, as we wrap up, people may know your show. If they don't, they should. But you interview inanimate objects on the show. Have you ever interviewed a symbol, a piece of design, a drawing, something like this?
Let's see. No, I haven't done it yet. I've had the idea to do a punctuation mark of some kind, either a period or an exclamation point. But I like the idea, and actually a peace sign, like a really a really mean peace sign, that hates when you look at him. He's like super tough, right? He's done nothing but fight his whole life. But every time you look at him, you think he's this simple hippie. Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea.
It's a good bit. All right. Well, if you do that, we'll run it in this feed as well.
Okay.
But, yeah.
A hippie punching peace sign.
I know.
All right. Well, Ian Chillag, host of Everything is Alive and fellow Radiotopian, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Happy Radiotopia fundraiser. I know.
Give us
It's
money.
a big one. Okay, there you go. You said it. Nicole Hammer, thanks to you.
Thanks, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Support for This Day in Esoteric Political History comes from Odoo. What is Odoo? Well, Odoo is the only software your business will ever need. Featuring a suite of integrated business applications, Odoo connects your business operations together so you can get more done in less time. Odoo has apps for everything: CRM, accounting, sales, HR, inventory, marketing, manufacturing, you name it, Odoo's got it. To learn more, visit odoo.com/thisday. That's odoo.com/thisday.
Radiotopia.